News Inside Out.
All right, once again, I want to welcome to the SML News Yugi channel. We are back here again with your main man, Timothy Kalyegira, our veteran journalist. We discussed a lot about Semakade and the reforms that will come across our political space last week with Timothy Kalyegira. Today, I and Tim want to look at what informs General Muhoozi tweets. What's behind it? Are they deliberate? How come he writes the way he writes? Is it intentional, or do we want to believe that when he writes, he's subconscious, like many people have wanted to argue? Kalib, welcome to the SML News UK channel. In the same space of controversy is General Muhoozi, the first son and now commander of our armed forces, who has been writing seemingly controversial, provocative tweets, one after the other, warning at the US ambassador, and almost saying things that are impossible the way Semakade is saying. When Semakade says, I have fired the Attorney General, and then Muhoozi tells you, I am
48 hours to leave this place and all.
How different. What really, as a political analyst, what is it that Muhoozi is up to?
I wish his family knew before you talk about it. I think I have an idea, but I won't say it. But I wish his family, if they knew, would pay anybody, I don't know, a fortune to understand what's going on in Muhoozi's mind. I know the reason, but I will not say it here. But
share with me. Tim, share with me. What is this? What could it be?
I'm sort of person, doesn't hold back anything. So by the time I hold back this, this is really crossing red lines. But
is the man alive to what he's doing? Because many people argue and say, when you find comments on Twitter and saying, it was a weekend, and being a weekend, he was loaded. Do you think he's alive to what he's doing? Is he aware of what he's doing? Is it deliberate?
There's sense alive in sense one, alive sense two. In sense one, I don't think Muhoozi fully understands what he's doing. Because if he knew, he would not be writing the things he writes. But in sense two, sometimes he posts some of those things on Twitter, and then after a few hours he's deleted them. So he seems to be either conscious of when he's gone too far, or he comes under very severe pressure, which I suspect is more from his uncle General Saleh than his father. Long story behind that, and then he goes and deletes them. So in sense one, you cannot do that to your father. I can understand these ordinary things over, hey, we're this way or that way, but when you go past personal opinions about domestic affairs and you start antagonizing other countries, if you know Museveni, for all his weaknesses, he tends to be cautious, especially in dealing with foreign countries. He's very much a Pan-Africanist, he's very much a sense of caution wherever possible. No rash action, maintain these relations. The Uganda government is supporting the official Ethiopian government in that civil war that breaks out in November 2020. That's the official position of a responsible foreign policy of Uganda. You can't come out and start tweeting in support of the rebels in a very complex breakaway situation like that, contrary to your father's official position. The one of Kenya, where I can go and invade you and overthrow in 2 weeks, okay, it's a banter, you can say it's just that general talk. The way you can do with football, we're going to hammer you like 6-0, maybe Kenya can leave it at that there. But then President Museveni himself felt the need to go and apologize to Kenya. So the Kenyans took this very seriously, serious enough for the president to write an apology to the Kenyans, and then also in an interview with one of the Kenya TV channels, repeated it. He's a cadre, but please accept my apology. So he's doing this, and then you go to that further thing. This very sensitive war going on between Ukraine and Russia, and where the West and Russia stands, a new Cold War. And the stakes the US has in Uganda, why Ugandan troops and so on. All these things since 9/11, 23 years ago, all that And then you go and do what? You start doing the typical Idi Amin things. We're giving the American ambassador 48 hours to... So, full well where your father stands in terms of what you call the Western powers. You might resent some of their views, but...
Unfortunately, you told me, you just said here, you will not tell me what you know about it. But I would be interested in knowing what informs this kind of behavior.
That particular thing I want to tell you on camera, I won't even tell you even off camera. But as I said, suffice to say,
Tim, you're being mean.
I'm not. If I told you what it is, you know, you will not survive the purge by the state, which takes us back to the same kind of view. The state is all under capture. But the key thing is, let's take another thing. You've seen his public tweets attacking his brother-in-law, Audrey Klabogo.
Yeah.
Now, how does that help a first family? How do you start attacking him? I mean, it's families have enough problems of their own. How you go public, and how is that supposed to help? So he's put his father in this really difficult situation. If you are a person who wishes Museveni bad, and you feel he ruled us badly, overstayed in power, and you believe in God, I can't think of a worse punishment Mr. Museveni has had to endure than that of his son, who has become like David's son in the Bible. Absolutely. You know that renegade son of King David in the Bible, the son who became like some prodigal. But well, you see why I was telling you I can't go on that far. So it's a tense thing. It's caused tension in the family and all these things. It's caused tension in the cabinet. You remember some time ago, months ago, when the NRM said, Mr. President, tell us where we stand, PLU and all this. And of course, remember, it's also causing tension in the army. Every army in the world knows that officers don't take part in partisan politics.
In politics.
Yes, standard things. And also they listen to the commander-in-chief.
But he has argued that PLU is not a political party. It is a civil organization arguing.
Yes. If he was speaking to kindergarten children, that would make sense. But he's speaking to adults who know what they know. We all know that's not true. Yes, defenses and explanations, with all due respect, it's not true. PLU is a political party. He's making political statements, commenting. I mean, that's why his father apologized. So let's not pretend that PLU or the MK movement are just another civic group. Even if it were that there, the question everybody has been asking, even those who are his apologists, tell us what will happen to any lieutenant colonel, any brigadier, any major general, any captain in the Ugandan army if he did exactly what Muhoozi did. Just statements on CBS FM in 2008, vaguely, just opinion by Brigadier Henry Tumukunde, landed him in years of house arrest.
8 good years
of
trouble.
You tell me all these statements, you tell me all this antagonizing of Uganda's allies and all this chaos is causing. You tell me name any other army officer who do exactly what Muhoozi does, including have their own PLUs of sorts, and tell me how many hours they would survive.
How can Muhoozi be tamed? And who can do it?
Good question. How can he be tamed? I think now it's, from my reading of the situation, it's now, I think, beyond repair, that damage. I think this is now the Muhoozi we're to expect till, as an on. There's a time he had come down. If you remember last year, he went for March of 2020, late 2023, and most of this year without any tweets. He just retweet other things. Then in August, he erupts again and all this. So
he strikes again.
And now has resumed.
And everybody says, yes, the man, the general, is striking again, and everybody feels it.
Yes. Now I think this is now him. Now, so the answer to your question is, this rule by impunity, this arbitrary rule, people have been warning the president, not just his political critics, but quote-unquote voice of reason, including the media, his favorite newspaper, the Daily Monitor, and others, warning that impunity inevitably comes to you. You keep turning a blind eye to things, you keep doing all that, so-and-so was involved in the junk helicopter scandal, 1998, fine, okay, Zakada, all this. That excuse, this letting things go, inevitably has created this situation in which Muhoozi is now untouchable, including by his own father. And also, secondly, very importantly, the advantage Museveni saw in building power around his family and relatives is now work against him. Just to very quickly summarize it for him, when he took power, we'd had all this instability in Uganda, and the year after he took power in 1987, this radical, charismatic young Burkinabe leader, Thomas Sankara, is assassinated. That shook Museveni. Because the question became, my goodness, if Thomas Sankara can be assassinated, and by people very close to him, the rumor is that Blaise Compaoré, his successor, I, who have always wanted to be in power and love power, what can I do to not end up like Thomas Sankara. And remember, the year before, in October, another of his favorite people, Samora Machel, was killed in that mysterious plane crash. So Museveni's reasoning is it's not enough just to have professional civil servants and professional soldiers. The professional army overthrew Obote twice. Bokassa was against you. So your relatives are the only people in our society that really will go with you all the way. That loyalty and having most of those people in places of power, from his wife to his son to his brother-in-law, the foreign minister, Sam Kiteezi, etc., spread out in the society. Every time these opposition leaders, the Besiges and Muntu and Maus would go for their campaign stops in districts, everybody who seemed to stop them was always Samahindu Siwe, Kalyegira, Mugisha, Mugisha. Everybody seemed to be from the same region. It's like however remote you go in Uganda, everybody seems to have the same region. So that has helped Museveni stay in power for very long. The people who would reason against you are your own relatives. The Samuel Doors, the Flight Rawlings type are your own relatives. But the trouble with that is the back part of it is impunity. Your own relatives are now in positions of power. You need them, and as most of us know, there's nothing as bad as trying to do business with your relative. Because if your sister ruins a business, you can't send your sister to jail.
Timothy Kikadi, I hear you've been to prison.
Yes,
one time, two times?
Once.
Are the troubles sorted?
No, sorted out. Do you want to know why, or that's another of those things?
Why were you there?
Well, in 2010, in July, as you remember, the day after the night of the Football World Cup, bombs went off in Kampala. Everybody from CNN to all of you in the Uganda media, to whoever, to embassies, to governments, all said this was Al-Shabaab and all this and such. There was one human being who instantly studied the situation, saw reports and said, that's not Al-Shabaab. And that person, whose name is name withheld, alleged that those bombs were planted by this government itself. Understandably, the government
Why do you withhold the name?
Amused,
my audience wants to know who was that man.
But I said the bombs were planted by this government here. And obviously the government wasn't amused. That's an understatement. And that's why I end up in jail. But as I insisted and still stand by my views, those bombs, I am 100% sure, not planted by Al-Shabaab. In fact, when the FBI, America's domestic security agency, the East of America, the FBI came to the scene of crime, their scene of crime investigators, when they checked all the ballistics and all the forensics, they told their counterparts in the Ugandan security, we don't see any evidence of Al-Shabaab, which is what one Ugandan had said.
I want us to summarize this. Thank you, Timothy Kalyegira. I'm trying to convince Timothy to be giving us his opinions, perhaps weekly. We need to share a lot into his, you call it pot of wisdom. He's been here for some time, he has seen it all, he has gone through it. We need to keep sharing with him. But just like as we want to summarize.
Very quickly, by the way, you might go back in history. The bombs happened in the 2010 World Cup, in the 1998 World Cup, same slow boat, whatever, also bombs the night of the World Cup final. So those of us who know the modus operandi of guerrillas, you can tell, when you can tell, most women have that instinct. They can tell when their man is cheating. He pretends, whoever meet in the office, it's like, yeah, no of those lies. So I guess I know this. About Kiteezi.
About Kiteezi. Let's summarize with Kiteezi. How it happened and how it's been handled, how it's been resolved.
How it's happened is what I began with, the now endemic incompetence that is Uganda. How all these mudslides.
Would you call that incompetence in any way? Not a tragedy, it's an accident.
Okay, it is an accident, a tragedy, surely a great tragedy, but I'm saying based on incompetence and disorganization, which is why the heads of KCCA were sacked. The key question I'm still puzzling over is why these people were sacked. Not only are they fired, but the government even goes this far to almost, require them to appear before the CID. It takes a very hard stance, which is very un-Museveni.
The answer have been given that it's criminal negligence. They've been held for criminal negligence, sacked for criminal negligence. That is true,
but if you know the Uganda government, the NRM government at least, and you also know its leader, these are not people who are particularly sensitive to human tragedy. These things happen, bus accidents all the time, mudslides in Bududa, Kasese, negligence of all kinds, drugs. absent from hospitals, the general disaster called Uganda, across the board, schools without books, that's criminal negligence, the buildings collapse in Kampala all the time, and you don't hear Jennifer Musisi's or whoever's are sacked. If you know the Uganda that you know, every 7-8 months a building collapsed, and they say building standards were ignored, and life sort of goes on. So why does Dorothy Kisaka and team get fired? I am really curious. I don't yet have a full answer. My speculation is one,
What action would they otherwise have expected?
the action would have been inaction, as is what is typical of Uganda.
Somebody sat on their jobs.
No, but
Timothy
what I'm
was saying,
saying,
somebody sat on their jobs.
what I'm saying, okay, how come the head of the Uganda Bureau of Statistics hasn't been sacked for this obvious incompetence? Why is he still on?
The Ubos boss
yes.
with the fake census results.
Yes, why is he not sacked, or at least even suspended? Surely.
I'm
What
also fearing
excuse?
to say what I know, just like you fear to say the other. I'm also fearing to say
Or,
what I
in
know.
my case, pretending to fear to say what I can say. But now the reason is this. My only speculation, lacking concrete evidence now, is one, either, okay, what I'm sure about, this is not an NRM government, cabinet, state house concern for the welfare of suffering Ugandans with this criminal negligence. That's not
Why
them.
would you say so?
Because we know. Because
Why would
of
you
the-
say so?
for the
When we do
reasons-
35 people.
but for the reasons, but we have lost more than 35 IDPs. If you know Uganda's history, life is treated not callously, but like I say, buildings collapsing, border borders, died in this the Kazinga channel, whatever. Life sort of goes on. Human disaster, human pain, from drought to people, the nodding disease in Acholi 2 decades ago, all that is not something that really causes sleepless nights to this government. Because if it did, you would say a very different government. So my only suspicion is somebody external to Uganda must have cracked the whip. These sensitive countries, these Europeans, especially Scandinavians, touch about the environment, global warming and all these things. Somehow one of them must have really got worked out. They might have had a meeting and decided we're going to suspend our aid to the Uganda government if that's not investigated. Something as serious as that, where the possibility of aid cuts or reviewing of, let's say, maybe the current Africa Development Bank or World Bank road infrastructure, if that's not dealt with. Here, we don't care about it. In America, just 4 people killed by whatever natural disaster. This becomes very political. So I suspect somebody in one of those Muzungu countries must have come out and said this is outrageous, and even risked something further, like saying we're going to suspend all our cooperation, urban planning and all these new city markets and these roads if that's not investigated, maybe under pressure from a senator or some lobby group in the US. That's sort of a bit like the pressure I feel over these gays. It's not domestic. Or two, which is sacrilegious to say, but let me risk it, somewhere in that case says, if it's not any of those European countries, then they might have been, I don't know, I'm just trying to speculate, maybe like an intelligence safe house somewhere in that place that also sank with that, or like a key intelligence officer who was doing some vital work of one of those zebra Senyang, is it Senyang, sort of, some mole or some informer, or like a little intelligence base that was critical to whatever operations, that then angers the state so much, and like you've lost all this. In other words, like, let's say,
Tim, you don't find any fault on Kisaka's side in managing that crisis?
but like I'm just explaining, they themselves, from the time they took power and before her, Jennifer Musisi, and before Jennifer Musisi, whoever, they have been arguing and explaining over and over again, people, this budget we have for KCCA is just not enough. Even if you double it, the needs of Kampala are just too many, beyond just garbage collection, disposal. It is just too much.
So who do you want to carry that responsibility?
What I'm saying is that in the wider sense, okay, let's go to the lockdown. You remember when COVID-19 comes and Kampala is deserted, and KCCA uses that opportunity to actually try and spruce up the city. You saw how they planted these trees along Loom Street, worked out that endemic problem called the Old Taxi Park, and used that chance. You can't say Jennifer Musisi or Dorothy Kisaka have done nothing. They really have done, like I say, beyond just a call of duty. They're trying to even create and have an artistic view of Alom Street, paint these places. They've introduced, I think, at Alom Street, the bicycle
lanes,
parking lanes. That sort of European-like sense of quality of a city, that can't be a Dorothy Kisaka who would, she being these typical born-again Christians, those sort of people, those Guyas high schoolish kind of girls. I don't see a Dorothy Kisaka in her upbringing, her education, her sensibilities, being the type to just know there is that landfill and neglect that, not Dorothy Kisaka.
There's a looming disaster and just
and not do anything about it if she could do anything about it. Not those two people, even her predecessor. And there are a lot of people in Uganda who one day maybe when this government goes, they'll tell us the stories. But that, if you look at their, as I say, that Jennifer Muhoozi, that Guyas high school lawyer, that Budoish, but if you know those people, these are decent people generally. They wish well for the country, really, genuinely. Even if the Kisakas and the Muhoozis were paid a quarter of their current good salaries, they'll still work with their full hearts. That I can vouch for them. And as I said, the way they try to decorate Kampala and use that chance and lockdown with nobody there, not to do nothing, but to actually work and say this is our only chance to solve these problems we've had. That cannot be the Kisaka and Lumbaza team that would wish for that dam. So to me, the culprit, in the wider sense, goes back to the collective Uganda government. The underfunding of KCCA, you create all these districts, you stretch out the resources, where most of the economy and most of the population density is highest in Kampala, is neglected, and then you spread out all these little districts, and then of course all your political patronage and everything. It's really just
wonderful team. Thank you. Looking at, in summary, let's look at the political landscape ahead of 2026. The political players, kind of preparations, the electoral commission as an arbiter in this, government as a funder of the processes. Let's look at that. Are we set?
Okay, since you say you want to have me more on this show, I guess we should discuss this closer to the election, but since you want to answer now, what I'm sure about is I think Uganda is reaching a breaking point, a genuine breaking point. It's no longer just the media, no longer just the political position. It's now really serious. And as I've explained earlier, by the time the Law Society can vote such a contrarian lawyer called Semakade, he's very much the antithesis of what it means to be a lawyer or dress like a lawyer. By the time they've gone to that point, it's telling you, to answer your question, whoever is going to come next, that's going to be the general picture. The Daily Monitor, which I write for, which President Museveni terms the bad paper, although he reads it religiously. I don't know why.
He reads it.
In fact, he's even, I think, its biggest marketing manager. Every time he complains about it, people say, all the more reason to read it. Anyway, that government critic, Noop, people power, anything that is critical of the current order is going to be on the rise. Every Semakade, even if so-and-so is like compromised. Okay, assuming this story of Matthias Mpuga is true, Mpuga, the original Mpuga, who I still believe is authentic Mpuga, I don't know why. I think he might have been framed, but that's another story for another day. As long as Mpuga was a DP person speaking for people of Masaka, he was on the rise. When he when he was compromised, people were disappointed. As long as Norbert Mao was Norbert Mao of DP, he was on the rise. Anybody gets into Museveni's camp, disappointed. As long as Eddie Kenzo, as long as all these baby cools were seen as the people, musician for those who are struggling, they were loved. When they switched to Museveni's side, the public got disappointed. So the general pattern is going to be more of what you call anti-government. The anti-government mood, the restlessness, more Semakades, those will be on the right side of history. Even if the election result still isn't what the general public voted, but that's going to be at least in this main area. And of course, that's going to be a crisis for the government. You can do like what happened in 2021. You can be declared the government in power on account of the other regions you won. But still, when we're 80% of the economy, in this wider Lake Victoria basin stretching up to Busoga votes against you. It's more informed, there's more media, there's more education, there's more enlightenment and all this. That should tell you something. You can't continue after 40 years in power always relying on the votes of uninformed peasants. You should start thinking after a certain amount of time in power, the elite themselves, and if education, which you say has come through USE and UP, if it's working, you should be producing more and more educated people who think critically. In other words, the fact that you're still drawing your main support from peasants
means you're not
you've failed
graduating anything.
You're not graduating, yes. The very a sign of achievement by you should have been to create more and more people with the reading culture, critical thoughts, more resistance to you, and that should be it. So that's the mode we see between now and then. Everybody who stands up. In the beginning, when these new people came in with that sort of butcher man, full figure kind of ghetto image, many people felt, this thing here. And remember even the question around its registration. But now that they've seen that new power, even parts of Busoga that hesitated a little, or even the Bantu-speaking Eastern Uganda, the Bugisus, Busias, the Bagwere, that world, now they know as sure as day. If you want to win, you have to come on a NUP ticket. So I think NUP, despite its recent internal wranglings, there's no second NUP, there's no plan B.
There's no plan B.
So whether you want it or not, if you're in Busoga or Buganda, and I think that the Bantu-speaking Eastern Uganda, NUP is what is stuck with, even from a selfish point of winning. So I think it's going to be more of that anti-government, more of that populism, more of that Semakade kind. Semakade, I think after his term ends, by then he will have become a fully national figure. His next point, I'm sure, is going to be to aim for Member of Parliament, which he's going to very comfortably win.
If not aim for the top seat.
For the time being, it being Semakade, I'm just pretending that he's not even thinking the top. He's the kind of person to say,
it could cause him trouble.
President of ULS to President of Uganda.
Having been president, what next?
Yes, and Semakade, unlike that image was of, even among these elite Baganda, the Budonian, Rotarian types, there's a sense of, that's one of us, but ghetto, too many tattoos, no. Semakade is like NUP.
But they're beginning to accept it. They're beginning to accept it. Majority are beginning to accept it.
So Semakade now is like a NUP people power, but whose education, whose brilliance you can't doubt, who is elite. In other words, a Muganda that Buganda can present to the country. And he has that very national view, a bit like the late Alex Naula type, those Baganda who all regions of Uganda relate with, or Rasta Rob of the 1990s. This guy from Lango, but every part of Uganda, he speaks Uganda well. That all round, that's where I see Semakade going. In fact, Bobby Wine had better be careful if he continues in this complacent state of assuming he's the default person. The way these Buganda's Kampala switches, they're mad in love with Sebagala, he goes to Museveni, they dump him, go on. The way Besje was the crowd puller for like 15 years, now he's almost relegated. You can just wake up one day and all the momentum goes to Semakade, and Bobby Wine becomes just another yesterday's person. So the stakes are high now, you can't be complacent.
Thank you very much. Timothy Kalyegira, munnamawulire ow'erinnya, amanyiddwa bulungi, musajja muyivu, anoonyereza mukugu, atunuulira ensonga n'azitematema bulungi nga munnabyabufuzi. Twagala okubeeranga ne buli sabbiiti okuyamba okutematema mu ebyo. Luno lunabuddu mulutegeera, olunyanyimbe mwenna mulumanyi kubanga lwasinga okwogera. Yatidde eddaga nti singa ayogera luno ayinza ate okwongera okwonoona ebintu ebisinga obungi. Kale njagala kwebaza olw'okuwaayo obudde bwo ate n'okumugobereranga by'ayogedde ye ndowooza ye. Gwe olowooza otya? Naawe gituweereze tutambulire wamu. Kale Timothy, I want to thank you. Njagala kwebaza olw'obudde bwo era okusaba nti buli kadde buli sabbiiti ofunengayo obudde omulimu gwe tulina kubanga eyo mu kyalo batunenya bagamba naye mwe abayivu temutuyambye, and abayivu balina kubayamba ki? We tutalaba mutulageewo, oluusi obalagawo ne batagoberera naye oba obalazeewo omuggu oba ogukoze.
Muhoozi, lwaki tewagaoko okusoma? Lwaki obeera mu sports betting? Balina zi smartphone, lwaki tebasoma?
Tebaagala kusoma.
Yes, so then kizibu kyawo.
Wonderful evening. Thank you. Nze Sir Simon Muyanga Lutaya. This is